Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm in the backyard again because I don't have to drive that far to get to the backyard. And I'm in my kind of camouflage dress, so you might not be able to see me. Yes, I wore a dress in my backyard to talk to you. All right. So last week, oh my gosh, you made it through, sort of. I know. You still have some work to do, and some of you still have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to say that you're slackers, but I know. It's been a hard time. It has. Just keep going, get it done. I'm going to be as generous as I can to you, but, you know, don't say dumb stuff when you answer your questions. Okay. I'm talking to you today about question number 3, which, oh, sorry, I'm looking for bugs and squirrels, which gives you the greatest opportunity to say dumb stuff. So be careful on this one. Okay. So the question is, what was the most important political, social, and economic change in the US in the 21st century? That is the century that started in, oh gosh, I don't even know who decides this stuff, either 2000 or 2001. But start with the Bush presidency. That's the younger Bush, the one who's still alive, who's probably a slightly worse public speaker than his father, or Obama. You could honestly talk about Trump if you like, or the Trump presidency if you like, even though it's not in the textbook. But, if you wanted to argue that this COVID 19 thing was a big deal, I don't know how I'd argue with you. So that would be cool. All right. So, things that I've seen that might be problems for you. And I know you haven't answered a question like this for me yet. So it's not that I've seen these problems necessarily from you, but when you've talked about domestic and foreign policy, you've kind of been confused about those. So domestic stuff at home, foreign policy stuff in other countries. But now we've got economic, political, and social ESP, which is kind of your standard history discussion grouping. So economic, anything that has to do with money. Social, it probably is something that's going to affect um, how society works. But it could also be a popular culture kind of thing. It could be a religious thing. You could argue that some medical stuff, is social. You could talk about something sports related, but if you talk about something in society that doesn't seem very academic, not saying it's a bad idea, but you need to relate it to how it impacted society in general. It needs to be a big deal. So it can't be like when your favorite music group broke up. That probably impacted you quite a bit, but it's probably not something that caused a big change in society. And you could also talk about the social impact of a political event. Like you may not think Barack Obama's presidency had a massive effect, that his decisions really changed the path of America and he wasn't incredibly radical as a person. That's true. I mean, he was a fairly moderate kind of guy. Most historians would agree with that. I know, goodness, I know some of, it's Williamson County. I know some of your parents wouldn't agree with that, and some of you wouldn't agree with that, and that's fine too. But he didn't go in and change the entire structure of government, or, he's a fairly conservative person historically. Okay. But the fact that we elected an African American president, that's kind of a big deal. So you could talk about how that may or may not have affected society. So now I did put an example in the question, and I know some of you looked, well, some of you didn't look at the example. Look at the example, but I know some of you looked at the example, and I know it's not from the 21st century because I didn't want you to take my work and say that it was yours. Um, and I talked about 20th century example, how desegregation was a massive change in society, which, I mean, who would argue that it wasn't? And I also know that if you wrote about desegregation, you probably would not write in quite as much detail as I did. And I get that because our jobs are different. And so I've studied history and taught history longer than you've been alive. So I know that it would be easier for me to write a question or an answer like that and have all that detail. I'm not expecting that your answer would be quite as detailed, but you need to have some detail. You can't just say stuff like, well, we elected Obama, and because he was a black guy, it changed society. The end. You can't do that. You have to put dates of the election. You have to put maybe, how different voters in different regions of the country maybe were more open to the idea of voting for Obama. Maybe you could show some statistics or some information or talk about something that's changed because Obama got elected. Maybe you see Stacey Abrams as a viable vice presidential candidate, or maybe you feel like it opens the idea to different minority group members running for offices like this. I don't know. I don't know. But you need to add detail. Okay, if you're wondering what could you talk about as far as dramatic economic, social, political events, you could talk about the impact of 9/11. That would be a fairly obvious one. And you could talk about how that impacted society. Maybe it caused some unity. I know some of you would want to argue that it caused a lot of dissension. Um, and you could talk about the economic impact that that had, or you could talk about, how that maybe benefited George Bush politically. You could take the same event and talk about how it had an economic, social, and political impact, but you better pick a big event like 9/11. You can talk about three very separate events. I mean, you could talk about the housing collapse during the Obama administration as an economic event, and that would be completely legitimate. You could talk about, um, goodness, just thinking about I was going to say the Kavanaugh or not impeachment, but the Kavanaugh hearings to get him confirmed, the confirmation hearings, those were kind of interesting as well. That would be, again, it's not in your book, but I didn't really, clearly, I don't want to tell you what you should write about, but you can't write about maybe, oh crud, what is the basketball team that won? Goodness, Cleveland won the championship, and then that fellow, LeBron James, moved to Los Angeles and he'd already taken his talents to South Beach. I mean, I don't know that you want to talk about basketball or sports, but you could talk about something like um, maybe how the economic impact of sports compared to some other industry that you think should be more important. Now, I am not trying to get you to write 5 pages, I promise, but I am trying to get you to write at least a paragraph about each thing that you talk about. So let's say that you did decide I'm just going to talk about 9/11, economic, social, political. I want a paragraph about economic, a paragraph about social, a paragraph about political. And if you want to pick 3 different events, that's fine as well. Um, on this one, again, just be sure that whatever opinions you put in there are your own. Like, I don't know, it was the stuff that I just finished grading from chapter 26. A lot of you talked about how Reagan was a huge disappointment to the conservative movement, which really? I mean, really? We named schools after him and roads after him in Williamson County, but okay, okay. Because Foner thinks that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to think that. And what he was talking about is that he didn't end abortion, that he didn't bring prayer back to school, because he can't really, because that was a Supreme Court decision, and it's not. I know every one of you prays before you take a math test, so you know prayer's still in school. But in the old days, gosh, I wish we'd had more time together because I would have talked about court cases and stuff. But in the old days, it was before my day, but we would say prayers out loud at the beginning of each school day, and kids got to lead the prayer on different days, and most schools had a prayer that you just read. But if you weren't from the religion, little construction, if you weren't from the religion of that prayer, you might find it a problem. Or if your parents were atheists and you were in kindergarten and then you went home and you said, "Hey, I led the prayer today," that could be distressing to your parents. So, there were lots of problems with that. I don't think they were mad at God necessarily. It's just, do we say a Catholic prayer? Do we say a Baptist? Is there a Baptist prayer? Do we say a Protestant prayer? Do we say a Muslim prayer? Yeah, there's lots of things to talk about with that. So, thinking about court cases, you could talk about campaign finance reform and McCain-Feingold being ruled unconstitutional. I think that's part of what led to the election of Donald Trump, which was kind of an interesting event as well. So pick an event or a court case or a personality, probably political, but not necessarily, that you think had a massive impact on the 21st century, since 2000 or 2001, depending on how you like that. Write about it in detail. That means, add dates, explain the event, and tell me why it's important. And please make sure that it's your opinion. Okay. Now, if you're wondering, is there a way I can get this wrong? Well, yes, there is a way you can lose points on this. One, if your event isn't real, okay, make sure your event's real. So don't talk about how the Martians invaded and that's the reason that Vandegrift High School got created or whatever. Don't make stuff up, okay? Um, if your opinion seems plagiarized, that would be bad as well. You'd lose points that way. And if you put stuff in there, and I'm not about Martians and stuff, but some of you were writing about things that just weren't true. You have people in the wrong parties, or you have events happening 50 years before they actually happened. You have to make sure that the facts are right. It's a history class. We like that kind of stuff. So, your opinion can't be wrong, your facts can be wrong. But, as long as your facts are right and your opinion's not crazy, like, I got friends who were. Oh, no, I probably shouldn't say that. But I was gonna say it. I started. I have friends who are posting about how the COVID-19 thing is not a real virus and it's just a conspiracy. Yeah. Please don't write about that. Write about something that is fairly accepted historically. It doesn't mean that your opinion has to agree with the average person's opinion or the common opinion. But, if you started to write about how we didn't really have a lunar landing and it was made up at a Fox News studio or Fox production studio, that wouldn't be good. Plus, I know, not 21st century. So, stick with stuff that's true, get the facts right, and make sure your opinion's not, the Martians did it or Obama was really a Kenyan Muslim or something. So, okay, I'm gonna get myself in trouble politically here. Okay, not my goal. All right, but if you have any questions about this Zoom meeting on Tuesday, so show up and ask about it or send me an email. And after Friday, I'll probably be a little more responsive to emails. I'm just so far behind on some other stuff not related to this class. So, yeah, I have another job. It's crazy, isn't it? All right. Hey, don't forget to tell your high school teachers thanks for Teacher Appreciation Week because they would like that. So, all right. Have a lovely evening. I'm going to go back inside and grade some more stuff. All right, and I'll go over questions 1 and 2 pretty soon. I know I'm doing this backwards, but 3 was easy to talk about, so I thought, I'll do that first. All right, good night.